Dr. Wendy Patrick.
The most important thing you need to know about me is I am a huge fan of your organization, of Lee, of Dan, of my dear friends Craig and Linda Barkus, partners in law, life, and love, which it says on their license plate. And obviously, I am a huge fan of ethics. I have become a huge fan of artificial intelligence over the course of the last, let's just say, 6 months, as it has been rapidly rolled out. And as this happened, I thought, what can I sort of give you as a preview of some of the most interesting ethical issues that we'll no doubt continue to see as it continues to roll out. So let me start with something you might remember from movies we've seen in the past. Dr. Chandra, will I dream? Do you remember who said that? That was supercomputer Hal. And do you remember, more importantly, what the answer was? I don't know. Fast forward all of those decades to today. Artificial intelligence, does it dream? We don't know. But thinking about it from that standpoint gives me a good way to sort of lead that into 3 components I'm going to give you to think about in using artificial intelligence. Because let's face it, we all use it every day. From directions to deposits, from reservations to everything else we do in research online. It is celebrated and condemned both personally and professionally, yet it can definitely be used ethically and effectively if we know enough about it and we know how to use it. You know, I feel like all of the newspaper articles I've read lately have talked about all that can go wrong. Isn't there some kind of an upside and a silver lining to an artificial assistant that can work smarter, faster, and longer if we can harness a way to make it credible and accurate? Isn't the fact that it is so much smarter, so much quicker, something we can use for good instead of being afraid to learn how to use it to begin with? So let's think about how we can harness it and use it in a way that'll benefit all of us and allow us to know if our students are using it too, which I understand is something that faces all of us as well, me included. But I want to start with the name. Artificial is such a curious title for this kind of intelligence. I mean, in a day and age of keto, gluten-free, non-GMO, grass-fed, everything, we don't like to think of artificial. And when you think of artificial intelligence, we are saying we're using a false brain to think. And a lot of people are very much opposed to that. Now, I have some people that would say, hallelujah, I need some help. Now, who has used ChatGPT? Okay, excellent. So I'm a very early riser, as Craig and Linda and other people that know me know, and there's nobody to brainstorm with in the middle of the night. So there are lots of queries you can put into ChatGPT for ideas. So you heard I'm a trial lawyer, I've been a prosecutor for 30 years, gulp, please nobody do the math. But why wouldn't I ask ChatGPT, as I have, what are 5 things jurors care about? I mean, what, I'm not going to cite that, I'm not going to put it in a brief and file it. But there are lots of ways we can harness those ideas. And there's no Google ads and all the things running down the side. And there's none of that to dilute the value of brainstorming and getting information. However, what we're going to think about in this short talk that'll give you 3 sort of points to think about, if we're going to begin with the idea that AI is ubiquitous already. We've already been using it, so let's think about how we can use it differently, safely, and comfortably. People are very uncomfortable with AI. You don't necessarily need to be. Think about it this way, our students aren't. They could not wait. They were delighted to be able to brainstorm. Half of them didn't realize they were doing anything wrong. They would be very open in class about how easy it was to get ideas through ChatGPT. That's fine as long as it's not turned in as their own product. And you know how hard it is to catch, those of you that have tried, because all they need to hit is regenerate. And now there's all these different versions of the query, and it's almost impossible to tell. You almost need them to fess up that they've done it. But three sort of common denominators of the issues, I should say, the broader issues that come up are programming professionalism, the title of this talk, we'll call that competence, programming personality, which I'll call chemistry, which arguably is difficult with AI, and programming social sensitivity, which is culture. Those are three of the challenges in using artificial intelligence. So let's dive right into programming. Now, people that know how to use it, they say, learn it, live it, love it. It's here to stay, learn how to use it, and then we can all sort of get along quicker, get our jobs done, automate what we can to free up our time to do what we want to do in terms of our cognitive capabilities. And in the brave new world, we've been doing that. I mean, the world is so small, it's a click of a mouse, it's a swipe on the smart screen. What does competence have to do with it? So think about this. We are quite comfortable making reservations online, making mobile deposits, but how many of you got here in a self-driving car? Why not? I mean, we all have family members that drive pretty bad, and we get into cars with them all the time. Maybe you're thinking that you're a bad driver. But we're not comfortable yet with thinking that there's an artificial being that can actually drive us from one place to another, even though we're going to call an Uber probably to get to the airport. So we're not exactly comfortable with robot drivers, but we won't think twice sending a robot into a building to disarm a bomb. It's almost the crash test dummy of current contemporary society. We're okay saving human lives by using automation to diffuse a dangerous situation, but we're not willing to use it in other places yet. As business professionals, we do subscribe, as the medical profession, to do no harm, and that is what gives us pause when it comes to our ability to use artificial intelligence. But isn't that what competence is about? Is learning all you can about how to control the technology that you choose to use. So ethics requires engagement, and competence requires engagement. That means we have to use it. Does anybody know why HAL actually was malfunctioning in the movie? Does anybody remember? Did anybody see the sequel, A Space Odyssey 2, We Make Contact? Wouldn't you know it, as I was preparing this talk on a plane yesterday, it was one of the selections. Talk about just a God thing. So I refreshed my memory by watching it again. And it was because HAL had gotten confused over conflicting orders. And there have been some very embarrassing cases in the news over AI making things up. They call it hallucinations, for those of you that are familiar with it. And that has been part of the explanation. Back when they wrote A Space Odyssey, they already foresaw how artificial intelligence might malfunction, but because it's trying to do the right thing, rectify conflicting instructions. It's kind of like when you're growing up and your mom says you can go out and come home at 12, and your dad says you have to be home by 10. Who are you going to listen to? Does the mother overrule the father, or do you just choose the one that said you could stay out later? So too with artificial intelligence and the mistakes that it makes. Now, we all use autofill, don't we? It's a beautiful thing. We use it all the time. Sometimes we end up misdirecting emails because it autofills the wrong name. We hit send too fast. Well, sometimes autofill is why artificial intelligence makes mistakes. It has read so much on the internet that it thinks it knows what you want it to do. And in the course of making up things in robot briefs that lawyers have filed, if you read those headlines, that's why it created case law, created the names of partners, and made, if you doubt the fact that this is a problem, ask ChatGPT about you and just see what it says. And then see if it thinks it's smart enough to make up a resume, or whether or not it actually can find what it needs to give you an accurate answer. All right. But what about the human parts of our job? What about being able to bond and build chemistry and build rapport? I mean, none of you are going to run into an artificial assistant on the midway tonight. Why not? What kind of conversationalists, by the way, are AI chatbots? Can you bond with a bot? Now, I prosecute a lot of gun violence and people that have made threats and people that have committed murders and all kinds of nasty crimes. And wouldn't you know that many cases in the news have to do with mass shooters corresponding and having conversations, if we want to call them that, with chatbots? Why would they do that? There's also been cases, by the way, where they've done research to see if people in crisis might reach out to a chatbot to talk. Do you think they did that? The answer is they did. And some of them even said, I felt more comfortable talking it out because I was embarrassed as to what I was feeling, and I was just fine and happy being able to talk it out with somebody that could respond to me that wasn't actually real. That's where we've come. That's how far we've sort of accepted the conversational aspect of artificial intelligence. Now, you can't build chemistry with it, at least I don't think you can, although some movies would say otherwise. Anybody seen the movie Her?
Yeah.
With Joaquin Phoenix? Who does Joaquin Phoenix fall in love with in the movie Her? His operating system. That's right. Now, it didn't hurt that the voice was Scarlett Johansson. So that might have had a little bit to do with it. Two of my favorite scenes in the movie, the one, he tells his colleague about it. She says, "You're dating an OS? What's that like?" The other memorable scene is he tells his ex-wife, and she says, "You're dating your computer?" But we feel one way or another about AI. And so in terms of competence, there is this issue of engagement. We have to engage with it to be able to figure out what is it about, how to use it safely, and how to use it ethically. Now, we hear all the time that it's coming for our jobs. Do any of you really think AI can take your job? Now, okay, a couple people raised their hand. Now, some people would say, I hope it does, because you know what? Then I could get this job that's what I do now, only better. Some people say, I hope it takes over the monotonous aspects of my job, freeing up my time to do what I applied to do. You know, it's sort of like my lawyer colleagues will appreciate, and even my professor colleagues as well. You didn't apply to do those jobs to sit in your office and do paperwork all day. Why not let AI do that if you can count on it being accurate, which means you have to learn about it and engage with it, which will give you more classroom time in interacting with your students. So there's lots of ways in which competence is the most important thing. Because the lesson isn't, no, you can't, but not so fast. The rapid rollout is scaring a lot of people when it comes to competence. Because all we keep hearing, and it is every day, all day. I have so many people that are emailing me headlines and things. I can't read everything. It's not possible because there's always something new and different. So competence is the most important thing when it comes to where we begin with it. Now, competence also means never tempering the need for speed by sacrificing accuracy for accountability. You know, accuracy is always going to be important even though AI can work fast. But we're still accountable for what ends up coming out the other end. You know, there's been some research studies already done on artificial intelligence. You know, and that's why I left and went, well, I didn't leave, I continued to work. I had to fund it. But I went to get a PhD mid-career. That was my midlife crisis. I didn't go out and buy a fancy sports car, but I feel like I spent almost as much money going out and getting the other degree. But I wanted to do more research into why we do what we do, why we think the way we think. And when you looked at why people use AI unethically, it's that sense of unaccountability. Well, it's not really them. You know, I mean, they delegated that to something artificial that's smarter than they are, so I'm going to rely on what the result is. But that result won't include the human element of decision making that those of us that teach business ethics know is always going to be front and center. It's about friendships, not just facts. It's about strategizing how to keep relationships intact. It's about fairness. I mean, there's so many things that we as human beings can do, AI can't do. So some of the research shows that there's a tendency to perhaps think it's okay not to be as ethical as you would otherwise be if you're delegating too much to AI. Very interesting. It's kind of like the cyberbullying cases I prosecute. Somebody thinks that, well, I'm, in my own room, I'm, somebody's across the world, it's not really me, I'm too far away. People end up committing suicide because of what they see posted online. So too with AI. The sense of accountability is something we also have to be very aware of. Okay, so let's talk about some of the dangers in terms of competence before we move on. So patterns make predictions. That's how AI works. But who programs the patterns? If people are programming AI with information that's biased, or is discriminatory, or is demographically slanted any which way, patterns are going to give you the wrong predictions. And that is consistently one of the challenges that we face when using AI, is we almost have to fact check it to some extent because of the programming part of it. So we want to make sure that our AI programmers are very competent and know what they're doing. But that begs another question in the business ethics world, and that's confidentiality. Because somebody is looking at this information. We like to say, oh, it's all artificial. It's not. And you know that if you've read about OpenAI and the other platforms that are using this. So your clients, your students, whoever you're servicing, there should be some kind of an agreement that you're going to be using artificial intelligence to help solve their problem. Because if there isn't, it becomes not just competence, but also now a confidentiality issue. So communication is also a big important part of the competence. We say live and learn. That is how AI gets smarter, is it learns by mistakes just like we do. But it doesn't live the human experience. It won't learn from the kinds of mistakes that we make when we ask a question too many in court, or say the wrong thing during a personal conversation with a loved one, or speak out of anger. I mean, most of us are who we are today by virtue of learning from our past mistakes. AI can never replicate that kind of human decision making, which, as you'll see, the theme here is it's useful as a tool to augment but not replace. Without intuition or instinct, it doesn't have hair go up on the back of its neck or feel something in the pit of its stomach. It doesn't have that sixth sense that we have. Some people say, oh yeah, not yet. Well, we have God-given instinct that always is going to be with us to help us navigate those personal conversations. You know how it is when you go to the reception tonight, or if you were at Craig and Linda's last night, you just click. You click with people or you don't. That's never going to be true to the extent that we would want to delegate that much to artificial intelligence. Okay, so diligence, competence, communication, confidentiality. Let's talk now a little bit about the second thing I want to talk about in programming professionalism. And that is, part of that analysis is also programming personality. Now, they have done experiments with bots that are human form but look a little too human. It's called the uncanny valley. Anybody read about this? We are very uncomfortable with something that looks too much like we do, or even if it's online and you're interacting. It's true that we can sort of mirror mannerisms and sometimes we can bond to some extent, but we're very uncomfortable with that. We're not uncomfortable with programming something into ChatGPT. We can't see it, it's not looking us in the eye. Even Hal had that red eye, if you remember. It's none of that, so we are more predisposed to give it more information. In other words, we're more comfortable than we maybe should be because there's a little bit of sort of chemistry. It doesn't judge. However, I told you I do a lot of threat assessment. It's designed not to tell you how to build a bomb if you ask it. So what have the smart criminals done, some of them, to get around that? There are workarounds to the extent, and I gave this talk for Homeland Security last week, and one of the agents shared with me that what criminals can do is pretend they're writing a book and they need to know how to write a bomb because they're writing a book. There are these kinds of workarounds that will give information that ChatGPT shouldn't be giving if it's asked in the right way. Now you might think, why not just join some community on the dark web that is staffed with other serial killers? Because those groups take a while to be sort of accepted into. It's much easier to use ChatGPT. So we're learning together how to stay out in front of some of the hazards and some of the downsides. So when we talk about learning and artificial intelligence being able to learn, one of the other things it can't do is judge credibility. It can't discern dishonesty. It can't sort of predict the types of things that we can because we're living the human experience. I always say the best example of that is every morning for some reason, my screensaver asks me if I like the picture that it's showing me as the backdrop. And if I say yes or no, it doesn't judge what I've said. It doesn't try to like read my body language to tell if I'm, saying if I'm really liking it or just trying to say the right thing. It is not critical of whether or not it's politically correct of me to like or not like the picture. If I say I don't like it, it just gives me another picture. It is very easy to use. And to that extent, many of us know that we put more information in artificial intelligence because we appreciate the lack of judgment. Now, how many cruise ship fans do I have here besides myself? Okay, good, one person. Okay, you guys are missing out. Free food, sometimes free booze if you know where to go. So cruise ships have been using robot bartenders for years. And you can't interact with a robot bartender. It won't listen to your sob stories at the end of the night, although nowadays it'll probably record them and somebody on the other end will be listening to it. It'll never get your drink just right. It doesn't know what a good pour is when you're asking for wine. So it's already been around, and sometimes that reminds me that it's already been listening to us for years. Do any of you remember the first time you realized that you had a conversation with somebody somewhere about a topic, and before you knew it, there was an optimized ad about that topic on your laptop? The first time that happened, it probably totally freaked you out. Nowadays, you almost expect it. And you don't even need to necessarily know where your device is. Nobody really knows how it works. But this is the kind of thing that gives us pause when we have conversations. It's almost like we have to go into some sort of a cone of silence, like get smart. Boy, I'm dating myself there, in order to have these personal conversations. So the chemistry, the human element is also very important, especially when it comes to ethical decision making, because to do that in business, in academia, in law, whatever the profession is, you need role models and mentors. And there's no way, at least I can't see it, that AI is going to be a role model or a mentor without the benefit of any human experience like we have. So we're always going to be incorporating it within a lot of other things. Now, what can it do for you ethically at work if you know how to use it competently? It can scan documents. It can do those search and rescue operations where you're looking for a nugget of information within 5,000 pages. And how fast will it take to do that? It's already done. Unbelievable exponential value to knowing how to use AI. But you might think to yourself, well, didn't it need a break, and is it going too fast? Does it need nutrition breaks, rest break, or mental days off? But there's got to be a way just to make sure that it's accurate. So many of the people that use it, and we have been doing this for years, also have all these sort of safety ways that they are able to fact check it. But you don't give it information that can't be tested. That's one of the ways it gives you more time to talk about the human element ethically with your supervisor. If you're thinking about firing somebody, demoting somebody, disciplining somebody for unethical behavior, you need to talk that out with people that you work with, that know the history, that have seen these types of things happen. We all know that. That's the kind of thing that can be only augmented by using AI. Maybe if it's like a time card issue, AI can find you the statistics you need to have that sensitive personal conversation. So that is sort of the personality part of it. And then the last part of it is the reality that, personality-wise, AI has what I'll call an unemotional advantage. It doesn't behave impulsively. It doesn't really understand a joke, but it's also not woke. it isn't influenced by any kind of cultural, social evolution to the extent that it would give you the wrong answer, unless somebody has programmed it that way. So in terms of transparency in programming, and it's interesting that I got that answer. I wonder what ChatGPT would say about that. And so I put in that query, and that's the answer I got. It said, in order to make sure, something to this effect, because it'll say it different ways if you hit regenerate, in order to make sure it's not biased, you have to make sure there's transparency in programming. I thought that was pretty honest, because that's exactly what you need to see to ensure that there's nothing that's going in that's going to unfairly color what's coming out. When I was growing up, my parents would have said garbage in, garbage out, if they didn't want me watching whatever they had on the TV. They would have said that with friends too, right? Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Well, it's also true when you're using artificial intelligence. It's the quality of the data that predicts the quality of the result. The other unemotional advantage that AI has that can be of great benefit to us is, unlike ourselves, what do we do when we meet somebody and we kind of get that feeling, there's some chemistry? It doesn't need to be romantic. We're developing rapport with somebody. We take off our reading glasses, and what do we put on? Our rose-colored glasses. And all of a sudden, everything is filtered. 50 shades of red, not gray is what I say. There's all kinds of ways in which we mute red flags if we like somebody. My psychology friends in the audience know this is the halo effect. Somebody impresses you with the way they look, the way they act, the size of their resume, the way they speak. You tend to attribute all sorts of other positive qualities to them when there's no indication that any of that is true. Oh, I'll bet she's a great mother. I'll bet he can keep a secret. There's no evidence for that. They've just impressed you in some other way. Well, you can't impress AI because it's not motivated or unduly influenced by the human aspect of interaction. So to that extent, you'll always get an objective answer, and it will always be an objective soundboard. Like many of you, I've tried this with a number of different types of topics, and it's always just full of objectivity, whether or not it's in favor of using AI to begin with, which is, again, transparency that we need. So then let's talk about why it might not give you the answer you're really looking for. One thing AI cannot do that we can is read between the lines. Now, any of you know this if you're married to somebody or you have a partner that asks you one thing, but you kind of get the idea that you really want them to do another. You know, I have a sibling that is always making statements and complaints, and I always ask, are you asking me to do something? Because I'm reading between the lines. A statement that it's getting really hot in here means I'm being requested to please make a trip to the air conditioner and adjust the temperature. Now, AI is probably not going to, unless you manage to program it to know the nuances of your personality, it's not going to recognize somebody that's passive aggressive, somebody that's reluctant. They're not going to recognize human vulnerabilities. So to that extent, we also can't use them for everything that we ask each other to do, especially talking about the impact of ethical behavior. And then, you know, the bottom line with sort of, I'll kind of bring it home here with the dark side of artificial intelligence that I think can be avoided is we talk about it being an alter ego. And I also teach things like sexual assault in the metaverse and all kinds of like really kind of edgy topics that people really don't know a lot about, but it sounds interesting. Well, it doesn't need to be an alter ego unless the motivation is to avoid or shirk responsibility. That's not why we use it, but that is what captures headlines very frequently. And I almost feel like I wish I could write a counter article to some of the articles that come out with all of the dark side and these are all the ways it's being used for evil by saying, yeah, it can be used malevolently, but also benevolently to help us work faster, to help medical devices get produced quicker, to have statistics run faster, to do the types of things that make us more able to do the very human aspects of our job. And that is an ethical way of business decision making if we know how to do it. So programming professionalism, programming personality, And then the last was the programming cultural sensitivity. That requires transparency in programming. And you know, it's interesting, I'm gonna quote you an answer that ChatGPT gave me on this one. So I asked it, you know, isn't artificial intelligence, you know, prone to bias? And here's what it said. AI algorithms can be biased if they are trained on biased data or not designed to take into account important factors such as race, gender, socioeconomic, and it went on and on. So it was interesting that it even gave me the reality that it's not just what you give it, it's what you keep from it that may prevent it from giving you the broad range of the broad universe of solutions that it is capable of giving you. And doesn't that just sound like some of what we grew up learning about? Is if you have a closed universe of information that doesn't include what you really need to have an unbiased assessment, there's no way to give it. And that's exactly what artificial intelligence answered. And I thought that was well said, because a lot of people don't quite know what ChatGPT does and how it does it. So in my profession, we would say, Lady Justice is blind. Artificial intelligence is not. Its eyes are open all the time, but it can only see what somebody programmed it to see. Which is why on the front end, part of the ethical analysis for us is the proactivity in selecting the AI mechanism, website, program, whatever it is you choose to use is probably the most important, because that'll ensure that you're able to use it to replace the tasks you don't want to do and be able to enhance the tasks that you do. So I talked a little at the beginning about the rapid rollout and about how. So I'll end with this question. Is it too much of a good thing, or is it too much too soon? And the answer, I think, is perhaps a little of both. Because although it can work forever, so the question and the issue with AI is not mortality, it's morality. And that's why we care so much about that aspect in the business ethics world. Professionalism and ethical duty is something that we are always able to do much better. So revisiting Hal's question, will I dream? I think the answer is yes. As we continue to work with AI, I think we can dream together of a way to incorporate this brave new technology into our jobs, into our lives, both personally and professionally, because we can embrace it together and make sure that it is done carefully, intelligently, emotionally, and also ethically. Thank you very much.